You are buried alive. The temperature outside is minus 40 degrees. You have no gear, no fire, no shelter. And the only material around you, the very thing trying to kill you, is also the only thing that can save your life. This is Wild Survival, the channel where the animal kingdom teaches you how to stay alive when everything falls apart. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because this is exactly the kind of content we drop every single week. Now, back to that frozen wasteland. Picture a small Arctic fox, let's call him Coda, crouched against the wind on the open tundra. The storm is screaming at 70 miles per hour. There is no tree line, no cave, no escape. Coda weighs less than 15 pounds. By every logical measure, he should be dead, but he isn't. And the reason why will completely rewrite everything you think you know about cold, survival, and the hidden intelligence built into nature's oldest designs. Before we go further, here's something I genuinely want to know, and drop your answer in the comments right now. If you were dropped into a snowfield tonight with zero equipment, would you know how to build a survival shelter? Yes, no, or not a clue? Scroll down and tell me. Your answers shape what we cover on this channel. Now let's talk about snow, because almost every human being on the planet has the same instinct when they see it. Run from it, escape it, fear it. And that instinct makes sense on the surface. Snow is cold, ice kills, the Arctic doesn't forgive mistakes. But here's what Coda knows that most humans don't. Snow is not just cold. Snow is also one of the most powerful insulators in the natural world. Let that sit for a second.
The same material coating that frozen landscape, the enemy, the threat, the thing sapping heat from every living creature it touches, is also packed with millions of microscopic air pockets trapped between ice crystals. And still air that isn't moving, is one of the single worst conductors of heat on the planet. It doesn't pull warmth away from you. It holds it, it traps it, it locks it in. This is the secret the Inuit people understood thousands of years before any scientist wrote it down in a journal. This is the secret Coda's ancestors figured out before the first human ever set foot on Arctic ice, and it is the foundation of one of the most ingenious survival structures ever built by any species on Earth: the igloo. Now, before you picture some cartoonish snow dome from a children's book, stop. Wipe that image away, because the real igloo, the one built by people who depended on it to survive 50 below zero nights, is an engineering masterpiece that the world's top architects still study today, not as a curiosity, as inspiration. Let's walk through how it actually works, and let's let Coda show us. Imagine Coda has watched humans build these structures over generations. He's pressed his nose against the walls. He's felt the warmth leaking out from the inside. He's studied the geometry of survival. Now he's going to break it down for us, piece by piece, because each individual element of this structure is a lesson in physics so elegant it almost seems impossible. First, the material. The Inuit didn't use just any snow. They used compacted snow, dense, wind-hardened snow that had been packed so tightly that those millions of tiny air pockets were locked in place and couldn't escape.
They cut this snow into blocks, thick, heavy, precisely angled, and stacked them in an inward spiraling dome. The walls could be as thin as 30 centimeters, less than 1 foot of material. And yet, with the right kind of snow, that 30-centimeter wall could hold back a temperature difference of nearly 70 degrees. Outside, minus 50. Inside, somewhere between 0 and 16 degrees above. Warm enough to sleep, warm enough to survive. All from 1 foot of frozen water. How is that possible? Because those trapped air pockets in the compacted snow work like a thermal wall. Heat on the inside pushes outward and runs straight into a barrier of still air that refuses to let it through. The cold outside pushes inward and hits the same wall from the other direction. The snow doesn't generate heat, it just refuses to let the two worlds touch each other. That single principle, thermal insulation through trapped air, is the same principle used in your home's insulation, in the walls of cold storage warehouses, in the jackets NASA engineers wear in simulated polar conditions. And it was figured out by Arctic people who had no labs, no textbooks, and no second chances. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. A good material is only half the battle. You also have to understand how heat moves inside a closed space, and this is where the design of the igloo goes from clever to absolutely brilliant. Heat doesn't sit still. Heat moves. It rises, it swirls, it climbs toward the ceiling and pulls colder air in behind it to fill the gap. This movement has a name, convection. And convection is the invisible engine that makes the igloo work from the inside out. Here's how it plays out. You light a small oil lamp in the center of the igloo. The flame is tiny.
We're not talking about a bonfire. We're talking about something about the size of a candle. That flame heats the air directly around it. Warmer air expands, becomes less dense, and floats upward toward the dome. Cooler, heavier air slides down along the walls to replace it. This creates a constant circular airflow, a cycle of convection that distributes heat throughout the entire interior with zero fans, zero ducts, zero technology. The igloo doesn't just trap heat, it circulates it like a slow, invisible engine running on nothing but physics. Now watch what Kota does next, because this is the detail most people completely miss. He doesn't sleep on the floor. When Inuit families built their igloos, they carved elevated platforms out of compacted snow, raised sleeping surfaces positioned above the entrance level. This wasn't comfort, this was calculated survival strategy. Because heat rises, those elevated platforms sit directly in the warmest zone of the entire interior. The people sleeping on them are bathed in that rising warm air, while the coldest air in the structure, the dense, heavy air that has completed the convection cycle and sunk back down, pools in the lowest part of the structure. It gets funneled into a natural cold trap near the entrance. The builders knew exactly what they were doing. They used the physics of the air itself to create a thermal hierarchy inside the dome. Cold below, warmth above. People sleeping in the sweet spot between. It's a thermostat made of geometry. But now comes the question that trips people up every single time, and I want you to think about this before I answer it. If the entire goal of the igloo is to keep heat inside, if every wall, every curve, every design decision is oriented around trapping warmth, then why is there a hole in the top? A hole right at the peak of the dome, an opening to the frozen sky. Shouldn't that be sealed? Shouldn't every possible exit for heat be plugged tight? Here's the answer. Absolutely not. And the reason is the difference between a shelter and a death trap. Inside that igloo, you have living, breathing human beings. You have an oil lamp burning fuel and consuming oxygen. Every exhale adds carbon dioxide to the air. Every minute the lamp burns, oxygen levels drop slightly. In a perfectly sealed space, this process is slow at first, invisible, odorless, silent. You don't smell it, you don't feel it. But over hours, the carbon dioxide builds, the oxygen drops, and the first symptoms creep in: headache, dizziness, confusion, a strange sleepiness that feels almost comfortable. In the Arctic, comfortable sleepiness is how you die. That small hole in the dome is not a flaw, it is the solution. Because of convection, the warm air inside the igloo, the air loaded with moisture, carbon dioxide, and combustion gases, naturally rises to the top of the dome. And at the top of the dome, it finds an exit. It flows out slowly and steadily through that small opening. And as it exits, it creates a gentle pressure differential that draws fresh, cold air in from the entrance tunnel below. A continuous, passive exchange of gases, clean air in, stale air out, driven entirely by temperature difference and airflow physics. Engineers call this the stack effect. It's the exact same principle that makes your fireplace chimney work, that ventilates modern skyscrapers, that keeps underground subway systems from choking their passengers. The Inuit were using it thousands of years before the word engineer existed. They didn't derive it from equations. They discovered it through observation, necessity, and the brutal feedback loop of living where mistakes mean death. That's not primitive knowledge, that's empirical mastery. But the igloo has one more trick, one more feature that operates on the same physical principles, and it might be the most elegant piece of the whole system: the entrance. Walk up to a real igloo and you won't find a door, you'll find a tunnel. A long, low, narrow tunnel that extends outward from the base of the dome. And that tunnel is deliberately built lower than the floor of the interior living space. This seems like a small architectural detail. It is not. That tunnel is a cold trap. When Arctic wind tears across the tundra and slams into the entrance, it flows into the tunnel, and then it hits a wall. Not a physical wall, a thermodynamic one. To reach the interior of the igloo, the cold air would have to travel the length of the tunnel and then rise up into the living space. But cold air is dense. Cold air is heavy.
Cold air doesn't rise on its own. It sinks and pools. So it collects in the bottom of the tunnel, where it slowly dissipates, never making it to the interior. The wind howls outside. The inside stays calm. That tunnel also acts as an airlock, a concept now used in everything from hospital clean rooms to submarine hatches to the entry chambers of the International Space Station. When someone enters or exits the igloo, they first move through the tunnel.
The exterior and interior are never simultaneously connected. The heat exchange between inside and outside is minimized. Warmth is preserved. The physics of pressure and density do the work of a door. No hinges, no handles, no technology. Now step back and look at the whole picture, because this is where the full genius of the igloo snaps into focus. Compacted snow blocks with millions of trapped air pockets form walls that a temperature difference of 70 degrees cannot penetrate. The dome shape distributes compressive forces so evenly that the more weight it bears, even from heavy snowfall, the stronger the structure becomes. Elevated sleeping platforms position the occupants directly in the warmest thermal zone of the interior. A ventilation hole at the dome's peak drives a passive gas exchange using nothing but the natural rise of warm air. And the entrance tunnel acts as both a cold barrier and an airlock, protecting the interior every time someone moves in or out. 5 systems, 0 moving parts, 0 electricity, 0 manufactured materials, 0 waste. Built from the very thing trying to kill the people inside it. Coda watches the storm rage across the open tundra from inside his burrow, a smaller version of the same principles, the same physics, the same ancient wisdom working in his favor. Animals figured out passive thermal management long before humans did. The same stack effect ventilates termite mounds in Africa. The same insulation principle keeps emperor penguin Helones alive on Antarctic ice. The same elevated sleeping strategy shows up in dozens of primate species that build sleeping nests above the cold ground. Nature has been engineering perfect survival systems for hundreds of millions of years.
And the igloo is one of the moments where human ingenuity looked at what the natural world had been doing and matched it perfectly, using only observation, intelligence, and the relentless pressure of survival. Here's what I want to leave you with, because this is bigger than just a cool building made of snow. We live in a time that worships technology, new gear, better equipment, smarter apps, lighter, faster, stronger. And all of that has value, but it has also convinced many of us that the fundamental knowledge, the deep knowledge, the kind that kept humans alive for thousands of years in the harshest environments on the planet, that old knowledge is somehow less valid than what we can find in a modern manual or a YouTube tutorial. The igloo destroys that assumption in the most elegant way possible. The principles that make it work, passive insulation, convective airflow, thermal zoning, pressure differentials, airlock design, these are not ancient tricks replaced by modern science. These are modern science. They are the principles taught in engineering programs, applied by climate architects designing zero-energy buildings, referenced by polar expedition planners preparing for environments just as deadly as the ones the Inuit called home. The knowledge was always correct. It was always advanced. It was just encoded in ice and practice, instead of textbooks. Real survival knowledge isn't about the brand of your gear. It's about understanding how your environment actually works. It's about reading the physics of the world around you, the way air moves, the way heat behaves, the way pressure and density and temperature interact, and using that understanding to stay alive when everything else fails. That is what this channel is built on.
That is what Coda knows. That is what Wild Survival teaches every single week. If this opened your eyes, even slightly, you already know what to do. This channel exists for people who want the deep understanding, not the quick tips, not the surface-level tricks, the real knowledge, the kind that actually works when it counts. Subscribe to Wild Survival. Come back next week, because what we're covering next makes the igloo look simple. See you then.